Hello, I'm Darci Legg, and welcome to Darci's Mindfulness Magic, where I support sensitive or empathic children inside and outside of the classroom, making each day better. Today we have the delicious Dana ASBY, who's going to give us a taste of her new book to be released and other information. But before we do, welcome Dana. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, I'm really excited to be here with you.
I'm going to give you a little bit about her background. Dana ASBY is a director of innovation and research support for the Center of Educational Improvement, where she conducts research and writing, oversees management of the school culture analytical tool for educator assessment, and is the copy editor of the Compassion Action newsletter. She's also the educational coordinator at the New England Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, where she helps manage several projects, including the Childhood Trauma Learning Collaborative. She is the co-founder of Parent in Moment, where she teaches families how to use mindfulness to reduce and increase the bond of love. She studied child development neuroscience under Dr. Kimberly Noble in the Neurocognition Early Experience, and as well as the Early Childhood and Family Policy under Drs. Jean Brooks Gunn and Lynn Kagan as Teachers College Columbia University, and Educational Psychology and Creativity under Dr. Bonnie Crammond and the University of Georgia. She was a preschool, early elementary, and junior high school classroom teacher in Missouri, Georgia, New York, and Japan. She's also a trauma-informed yoga teacher trained in Shaktibar and Exhale to Inhale. Wow, you have accomplished a lot. Oh, so let's start off by talking about compassionate school model and mental health. What can you tell us about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So I have been working with the Center for Educational Improvement for a few years, trying to bring their heart-centered learning concept to the wider world. And we've been fortunate enough to work with Yale University with the Childhood Trauma Learning Collaborative with a really great group of 24 educators in New England, school leaders, school psychologists, and social workers, as well as principals and district level administrators. And they've been doing really great work spreading heart-centered learning throughout their states and in their districts. And so we wrote a book called Compassionate Schools Practices, Fostering Children's Mental Health and Well-Being, where we tell the story of how we've been guiding these educators to bring heart-centered learning to their schools. And we developed the Compassionate School Mental Health Model. And it's very different than the traditional way of looking at student mental health, where we have what we call the medical model, where people in white coats with prescription pads come and tell you what the best course is. Instead, we look at it from the lens of recovery and being person-centered. And we ask educators to think not just about how to address mental health issues when they come up to the forefront, but also to prevent mental health issues by doing whole school practices that help students understand how they can become more compassionate and how they can be a part of a high-functioning school community. So we have an array of practices, policies, and systems building recommendations for schools to use so that they can become more compassionate and also trauma skilled.
Perfect. Can you give me one example that you would use or train an educator on as far as the heart-centered learning model?
Absolutely. The heart-centered learning model is the idea that to holistically educate students, we can't just focus on academics. We have to think about their social and emotional lives as well. We take it as the first step to building a holistic student, teacher, school is to focus on compassion. And we really want to make sure that students understand how their own emotions and their own stress affects their ability to be compassionate. We first start with consciousness, bringing them into an understanding of how their emotions affect their thinking and their behaviors. A lot of teachers think that kids act up because they're just bad, but really we know that trauma changes the way the brain works, and because of that, it changes the way children react to different stimuli in the classroom. What we advocate for is to have more compassion when we react to these students. Think about not what they did wrong, but what happened to them and how we can retrain their brains to regulate themselves a little bit more. So we take them through understanding their emotions, building more confidence, having more courage, and using compassionate action to better their communities.
I love it. I wish I had known more of this when I was a teacher. It's amazing because trauma does cause a lot of the issues. It is probably, I would say, the number one reason why children do act out, and as adults too. So right now, it's going to be really difficult for children to go back to school whenever that does happen because of the COVID-19 situation, having to be homeschooled. Everybody's unsure about what's going on. Can you tell us how you are supporting the school system in this model right now?
Absolutely, yeah. We are going to be releasing a guide pretty soon for schools to give them some guidelines to support not only student mental health when we go back in the fall, but also staff mental health. And regardless of whether that's in person or online, we know that it's really important that before schools go back to academics and learning as usual, we do address the trauma and the chronic stress that has happened because of COVID-19. The trauma has not been equal. Families who are already struggling are struggling even more. Many people have lost their jobs or have lowered financial stability, which causes a great deal of stress, while other families have had the chance to bond more deeply and have thrived. So it's important to understand that not everyone's going to come back to school with an equal reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic. But we do have 7 recommendations for schools to use as they go back. The first one is to create a sense of safety. It's really important. As you mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty around COVID-19. So what we can do is let kids know that we are together going to get through this. Adults are protecting you, and there are things you can do to protect yourself too. The next thing that we advocate for is to build a community, a compassionate community. Work towards belonging and a shared vision, a shared purpose. Third recommendation we have is to work with community partners to support student and staff mental health. It's really important to teach kids resiliency and stress coping skills. It might be important to do a little bit of universal screening if your student mental health support system has the capacity for that. But it's just really important to teach self-regulation skills as well. And we really advocate for using mindfulness to do that, which is our next recommendation. It's also important that we address the grief. Some students lost family members or friends, but there's also grief in not being able to celebrate the end of the year, not having a graduation, not being able to say goodbye to your class one last time. So it's important to address that grief as well. To get over the grief and heal, it's really important that schools reestablish routines and connection. Youth crave stability. So if we can get back to those routines that gave children a sense of time passing and a rhythm, that can be really important. And through those routines, we can make stronger connections because we know relationships between adults and children are one of the best buffers against trauma. And then the last thing that we ask that schools do is to take some time to vision for a better future together. Instead of having a top-down model where the principal decides what the motto and the vision statement is, work together with all the members of your community to come to the table and see what everyone's needs are. We've been working with families more than ever these past few months, and we've started to understand that a lot of ideas that families have that we wouldn't have known if we hadn't been in such close contact with them. So let's bring them to the table more and hear their voices, and especially student voice can be a powerful a powerful voice in this conversation. So come together, build more community, and focus on social emotional learning rather than academic learning.
I love it. I love the fact that you're taking from the community, from the educators, from the students. You're everywhere. You're gathering it from all sides. Love it. So what is and how most people, like teachers, are on board and against it because it's not the healthiest thing for children, but how do you get the rest of the public on board regarding that? I think that's how we started it.
Well, so we really do believe that standardized testing can hold schools back, especially schools that have lower scores on standardized testing, which is often something that schools need to improve before they can access really important funding that would actually help them improve their academics if they had access to it. We really don't see the point in punishing schools that have large numbers of students living in poverty, which in itself is a trauma, and those who've experienced things like sexual abuse, physical abuse, and neglect. When children experience these things, their prefrontal cortex is just not working correctly. The part of your brain that makes decisions, organizes, and can plan for things, it's just not working at the same capacity. If we expect students to be able to score higher on standardized testing, we have to first address the brain development. And using social emotional skill building, especially mindfulness, which helps with self-regulation, can be really powerful in setting the stage for academic improvement. But we know that these things, while they are evidence-based and we have lots of great success stories about them, they don't happen overnight. They take time. Expecting a school to be able to raise their academics in a single school year after starting an intervention like mindful schools, zones of regulation, conscious discipline, all these different great programs that are evidence-based, they don't make a difference in academics fast enough to impact standardized test scores in a single calendar year. We advocate for taking a larger view of things and looking at schools more holistically, not just looking at those standardized test scores when you're choosing a school as a family, or not just looking at the standardized test scores to distribute funding at the state or district level.
Yay! Yes. It has to be about the whole child. It can't be about a test score that they did on one day. It just makes no sense. It really does.
Yeah, it really does.
I wish we could just play that over and over and over again, what you just said.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
I'm sure every teacher agrees with it too. I don't know of one, I'm sure there's one out there, but I don't know of one teacher that is in support of it. I don't know one teacher that is not totally stressed out about it, feels like they're judged because of a test score that a child in their class has. It's just ludicrous.
Yeah, it's actually why I left the field of teaching, because I just could not support giving 60-minute sit-down paper and pencil math tests to kindergartners. It just did not make sense to me. And I saw the negative mental health effects on the children, and I brought the fact that these were developmentally inappropriate to not only my principal, but the district leader. And they were just told that the way to increase standardized test scores at the third grade level was to start practicing in kindergarten. And we know that all the research about how important play-based learning is for early elementary school says that just sitting down and filling in bubbles does not make sense for a 5-year-old.
No, not at all. Never. And it never will. It will never make sense. I just don't understand why people who make the decisions don't get that simple concept. But good for you. Too bad you're not in the classroom anymore, but you're doing so many wonderful things outside of the classroom. So that's good. A happy hack that you love to use?
Well, what I have been telling parents and educators and youth during this time is that the best reset when you're feeling really stressed in the moment is breath work. Because taking a deep breath not only resets your emotions, your thinking, but it also resets the central nervous system. So your heart is going to slow down. Your sweat glands will stop secreting so much. you'll be able to take deeper inhales and exhales, which is going to slow down the rest of your body too. So I love this really quick breathwork activity for older kids called square breathing. It can be done anytime, where you just look straight ahead of you, you bring a slight smile, and then you breathe in through your nostrils as you count up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then exhale through the mouth, counting down. 4, 3, 2, 1. And then for younger students, you can take the breath work and make it a little more fun. You can use Spider-Man breath. So you tell them to put their palms out, and then as they squeeze their fingers in tight, charging up those webs, they breathe in through their nose. Then they hold the breath as they charge those webs, and then release the webs and the breath through the mouth at the same time. And it can be adapted for Frozen fans to be an Elsa breath, charging up icicles instead. So breathwork is really adaptable to any age and is a great instant reset.
Is there anything that I did not ask you about that you would like to inform us of? Anything I didn't cover?
You covered a lot. I just want to reiterate that as everyone goes back to school, just make sure that your focus is really on connection and building community, because the learning can wait. And we know that students' brains right now, while they are in flight or fight, are just not primed for learning. So we have to address that student mental health before we get back to the academics.
Well, Dana, thank you so much for being with me today and sharing all your wonderful wisdom.
Absolutely. Great to talk with you.
Yeah. What's your name?
Cora.
Cora. Aw.